All right, welcome to the Get Busy Living podcast, and it's been over a year now, and we're doing the podcast for every Thursday. I've only missed 2 Thursdays out of that. It's over 14 months now, and the wonderful Nicole Yeates joined me on the 30th of September, 2023, and we're so glad to have you back because we can't wait to hear the gold nuggets about how you're doing over the last 14 months. So. Thank you very much, Nicole, for coming on to the show.
A pleasure. Doesn't time fly?
Oh, doesn't it what? So it's been a crazy 14 months, I suppose, for you as well as for me. But I'll kick off the podcast with the usual question. So tell us, Nicole, what's changed? What gets you out of bed every morning?
Well, 2024 has been a real growth year for Get Brain Fit, and what gets me out of bed every morning is just that shining purpose. I just want to make a difference in this world, and by helping people reach their true potential. And through doing that, through brain fitness, people really can become their very own barrier crackers to reach their true potential. I consider myself an expert barrier cracker, so I love teaching people how to overcome barriers. Oh, lost your sound.
Yes, I've seen. Sorry, I had it on mute. So I've seen you in action. I've seen the results you've given people. So they're commendable, Nicole. So, so tell us. Yeah, let's go back to the start. So what got you here? How'd you get here from where you came from? Because you had a bit of a problem when you were 16 years of age. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I left the house on the 19th of June, 1987 to go and watch some friends play basketball. I drove off from my house on my motorcycle, and that Nicole that left the house, never came home. So on my way to the basketball game, basically I was hit by a car. It was a hit and run accident. He left me on the road for dead, just took off, and basically I died on the road. I was found by a nurse who happened to be passing by, and he resuscitated me, called an ambulance. I died another 2 times and lapsed into a natural coma for 3 weeks with the prognosis of expect death or life in a vegetative state. So I really had to train my own brain. Retrain my own brain to learn to walk, to learn to talk, to learn to go to the toilet, to eat, to social cues, everything.
Yeah, it just blows my mind. Like, yeah, was it a car or was it a truck that hit you?
No, it was a car that hit me. Yeah.
It was a car, yeah. And
Holden,
just holding together. What was I going to say? So I worked in emergency, and I saw a lot of motorcycle accidents. And when you told me, it dragged you for a fair way, yeah?
Yeah, he dragged, basically when he hit me, somehow my motorbike got caught on his bumper bar, and I got entangled in the motorbike. So as he took off from the scene, he dragged my body along that cold, hard concrete for a couple of 100 meters, kept going, and he dragged the bike for nearly 1 kilometer. When the bike did come off, so did his license plate.
Wow. See, when you told me it was 200 meters, I was like, wow. Because I've seen accidents where they've dragged them 10, 15, and you think, wow, they were lucky to survive that. And when you told me 200 meters, I thought, oh, what? That's just amazing. That's
yeah. So
someone was looking over you.
Absolutely. Well, that first near-death experience on the road, I saw my father.
I'm pretty sure you had some close encounters.
Yeah, well, he died when I was 3. So, I saw him.
Okay. So you had a memory of him. You had a memory.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's he was. I was 3. He was 30 when he died.
Yeah.
And so there's pictures around the house of him, and things like that. So I definitely knew who he was. He didn't speak to me at that stage, and the second near-death experience, he spoke to me.
Wow.
Mm.
Getting close, too close to home. Was I going to say, that's amazing. Yeah, and that's what I mean is when he told me that, I was just like, I was doing the calculations in my head, and I'm thinking, wow.
Yeah.
And then when you told me that you were resuscitated 3 times, that makes sense because you're the only person I know that has been dragged that far and survived.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's not many people survive that distance.
No.
And
No.
and you're on a motorcycle and there's no coverage, and I get it, I understand. And then when you told me that you the first time I met you, you told me you had to retrain yourself to talk, you had to train yourself to walk, and I've seen you do excites before and presentations, and you've said yourself that you weren't the same person when you came home.
No.
You weren't the same person.
No, well, that's the thing with brain injury. Like as a 16-year-old Nicole, pre-accident, I was actually really shy. I was the sort of girl that would go to a party and only talk to her friends because I didn't have the confidence to talk to people I didn't know. And then when I had this brain injury, I had diffuse brain damage, which included frontal lobe damage. And therefore, my filter was very compromised. And I went back to about a 3-year-old where I would just say whatever came to my head. And there's actually a bit of a funny story about that when, because Mum didn't have her license at the time, she didn't have a car or anything. So to get me to physiotherapy, occupational therapy, psychology, all those treatments that helped in my recovery, she had to take me on public transport or a taxi when she could afford it. And so we got into this taxi one day, and the taxi driver had a really big nose. So me with my lack of frontal lobe function.
No filter.
Top of my voice. Oh, Mum, the taxi driver must tell a lot of lies because he's got a very big nose. My poor mother.
Yeah. So that's a funny story, but I'm sure that you would have had issues with friends as well. You weren't able to communicate properly.
Absolutely. I just would say whatever came to my head. I could be embarrassing, offensive, or both, and that caused strain in relationships for sure. And also having that lack of filter in the context of being vulnerable to people who weren't so good, because I just couldn't sort of determine whether people were. My intuition actually was zero for the first few years, and so again, Mum had to sort of keep a very close eye on me as to it would very easily would fall in with the wrong crowd.
Yeah, true. And that also, you would have had to, you would have known the medical staff very well as well. Is that right? Because you're with them every day.
Well, like after I got out of hospital, like I spent a few months in hospital, but when I got out, it was lots of appointments, lots of treatment, the standard traditional treatments. But Mum was also, she was very proactive, and she researched other treatments. Like I saw naturopaths, I had massage therapy. Oh my goodness, even healing crystals. She took me to some place with healing crystals. Like honestly, she was willing to try anything to help to get me to a better place. I became suicidal, so
you would have.
that was those injuries, the disabilities that came as a result. I had epilepsy after the accident. I wasn't able to drive. I didn't know my way around the city I grew up in because I had amnesia.
Can't remember.
I wasn't cool anymore, according to my friends. They didn't know this Nicole, and they had no experience with brain injury. And back in the day too, Scott, we're talking today, we're so lucky we know so much more about the brain and neuroplasticity. But back then, they still thought to some degree that your brain didn't change once you reached adulthood and you were stuck with the brain that you've got.
Yeah.
So, now we know we can change our brain at any age, and whether you've got injuries or not. And just, when you give it good input, when you look after your brain, we can build our brain.
Yeah. Yeah, so I love your story because you had to. You had to think out. You had to think outside the box to get a better result, I should say. And so that it's commendable what you did for yourself. And now I can see it. You're helping others to do the same as what you did.
Yeah. Well, now I'm in the process of writing my second book. My first, might as well do the plug here. The first book is Holding On to Hope, which is my story of going from that prognosis of expect death or life in a vegetative state to where I am today. And the second book is called Reclaim Your Brain. And that's really about the actions to just do that, reclaim your brain, to grow your brain, to reduce risks of Alzheimer's disease and other neurodegenerative diseases. It's a fascinating thing, actually, that even though with mental health issues and so forth, which are so prevalent these days, medical professionals very rarely look at the brain. And, how do you know unless you look?
Where's the messages coming from?
Exactly. And, it can be like stories like people I've worked with who've had ADHD and depression. And, they've been like a mouse on a wheel on medication. And I've got nothing against medication, don't get me wrong, but not one size does not fit all when it comes to the brain. Because this lady that I'm talking about now, she was on an SSRI. She had ADHD, so her frontal lobe function was already compromised, and the SSRI was slowing it down further. So she actually needed a more stimulating antidepressant. But it wasn't until I looked at her brain through my questionnaires, my brain health assessment, that that was realised. And I wrote to her psychiatrist and said, with my findings, and recommended that she be on a more stimulating antidepressant. And she improved out of sight after that.
Yeah. So just for the audience, so an SSRI stands for selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, and that's an antidepressant. It's the go-to for any mental health issue. It's the go-to. That's the first thing that your GP will normally put you on. Normally, not always, but normally.
Yeah.
When it comes to depression.
Absolutely, and it happens time and time again. Recently, I met a gentleman who had been on an SSRI antidepressant for 5 years, treading water. Again, no one had looked at his brain. Yeah. And our brain can give us clues. Like if you are stuck, or someone who's stuck, as Get Brain Fit as a registered NDIS provider, if you know someone who's really stuck, whether it be mental health, brain injury, neurodiversity, the brain can give so many clues to help make progress, to get that momentum going.
So tell us about that. Tell us what you mean by that. There's indicators. Is it symptoms
for sure.
You're talking about? Symptoms you're talking about, or is it blood tests? Or
no, well, the brain optimization assessment that I do is basically a questionnaire which helps me determine which areas of the brain are struggling. So, for example, that person, we've all met that person who's inherently negative. Their glass is always half empty and they say no to everything. No, I can't do that. No, that won't work. And with those people, quite often it's the anterior cingulate gyrus area of the brain, which sits just behind the frontal lobe, that can be overactive. And that causes them to automatically go to that negative space. They tend to be people that find it difficult to be mentally flexible. They can't, they find it difficult to go from thing to thing, from thought to thought, from action to action. If they're in the middle of doing something and you interrupt them, they get really agitated and irritated. Those people typically have low serotonin. When they have a high cingulate gyrus, they typically have low serotonin. So, but how would you know unless you look? So my assessments actually determine this sort of thing. There are 16 different brain types, 7 different types of ADHD, multiple types of anxiety and depression. So I identify all that and then design a brain optimization program that's customized to that person's unique brain. We all have a different brain. One size does not fit all.
Yeah, and yeah, that's exactly right. So, and yeah, so it's not only brain injuries that you're talking about. You're also talking about people that are just depressed and just aren't getting the answers. Just not getting the answers that, they've tried this medication, they've tried this other medication, and they're still feeling depressed or whatever that.
Yeah. Those people, or, people that, about 50% of my work is working with entrepreneurs and business owners that have ADHD or other neurodiverse conditions.
Yeah.
And I, again, help to look at their brain, determine which areas are struggling, and give them some strategies to go forward with. And those sorts of strategies can be anything from specific brain training exercises, diet changes, exercise, supplements, again, because each brain's different, there's a different kind of recommendation for every person that I work with. And it's an amazing, I just love the empowerment that this, looking at the brain and helping people realize that this is something they can change. And when you take, especially with mental health, when you change the conversation from a mental health issue to a brain system issue that's part of your anatomy, it's a very different conversation. It takes away that kind of guilt and shame of a mental health issue and changes it to, oh, okay, so let's take the anterior cingulate gyrus. Okay, so the anterior cingulate gyrus part of my brain, which is here, is overactive, and these are the steps I can take to address that. Awesome. That's a really empowering sort of conversation to have. And typically, those things to change that brain aren't that difficult to implement. Their lifestyle changes. And, even if they are struggling with memory, like if someone does have brain injury and they're struggling with memory, or people with ADHD can also struggle with memory, I've also got strategies to help improve their memory and manage their memory so that those things that they might normally forget and aren't so much of an issue anymore.
So, and when you say all brains are different, what do you mean by that? Do you mean that there's certain damage to the brain, or that there's certain shapes to the brain? Is that what are you talking about there?
It's more about, there's a couple of things there. So blood flow to the brain. So you can see in the picture behind me on my screen, all those little brains in the background on that black sheet.
Yep.
That is an example of different brains in different states. So a brain that's overused alcohol, a brain that has used marijuana for a couple of years, they're all different things that affect the brain, and how we actually see that is through SPECT scanning. So when, if you have a brain tumor, for example, you would have an MRI or a CT to determine where that tumor is in the brain and what size it is. It's looking at the anatomy of the brain. When we're talking about SPECT scans, we're looking at blood flow, and blood flow to the brain is critical. Low blood flow is the biggest indicator of Alzheimer's disease. Low blood flow shrinks the brain. Low blood flow to any area of the brain causes issues in that area of the brain. So that's when I say when every brain is different, like if you are someone who has ADHD or ADD, typically, most often, the blood flow to that frontal area of the brain is compromised. So we want to be doing things in a brain optimization program. We want to be doing things to stimulate blood flow to that area of the brain to help change the brain and balance the brain.
So what can cause that? What can cause that lack of blood flow?
So that can be lack of sleep, diet change, poor diet, brain injury, neurodiverse diagnosis, mental health. There are lots of things that can change our brain. We're born with a certain amount of brain reserves, and as we go through life, all those things that you can see on that that black flyer I've got there, all the the alcohol, the drugs, lack of exercise, those things can all change our brain for the negative. But also isolation, social isolation can change our brain, can shrink our brain. So,
okay, that's interesting. So can you tell us more about that?
Connectivity, social, human beings are, typically social beings, and that stimulation that we get from interacting with others, we learn new things through interacting with others. It shapes our language patterns through communication with others. There's so much stimulation that comes from being social.
And does that also, you talked about neuroelasticity. So that helps to connect that neural message. Is that what you mean?
Well, neuroplasticity is something that's activated whenever we are learning new things, when our brain's adapting. We create new neural pathways. I kind of align it to like a forest. If you are walking through a forest that you've never walked through before, no one's ever walked through before, there's no pathways, it's going to be really hard to get through those trees and bushes and branches and so forth. But if you take that same path every day, it gets easier and easier and easier. And that's just like our learning. When we start to learn an instrument or a language, it's really hard. But the more we practice it, the better we get at it, and the more easy that new skill becomes. Now, if we stop walking through that forest, we'll take a different track. The branches are going to build up, the trees are going to grow again, and if we go back there, it's going to be harder again, it's going to be a little bit easier than when we started, but still a bit tough. So that old saying, if you don't use it, you lose it. Yeah. So true when it comes to your brain.
Yeah, I'd like to really talk about diet, because it's part of my business too, and I get it when you say stuff. I really do. It resonates so much with me. So tell us about that. So especially like when someone goes in for surgery, how do they prep? Because you would have researched that too yourself. How do they prep the patient?
Not so. I mean, typically the patient is given guidelines around, what they should eat or shouldn't eat prior to surgery. But as an everyday sort of thing around making sure that your brain is going to be serving you well into the future and preventing neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's disease, which no one wants, cutting out sugar. Like reducing processed sugar in the diet is so important, because sugar shrinks the brain. Sugar causes inflammation. Sugar disrupts brain cell firing. And I think I might have might have told this story last time, but for the listeners who haven't heard this story, I actually met a lady after a keynote presentation I was doing on how sugar shrinks the brain. And she came up to me afterwards and she's like, Nicole, you are so right. Sugar really does shrink the brain. And she told me about her story of having a brain tumor a few years earlier. Now, it wasn't a life-threatening brain tumor, but it was a life-destroying brain tumor. She had headaches every day. She had brain fog. She was really struggling. So the surgeons decided to remove the tumor from her brain. But it was in an area of her brain that was quite difficult for them to access. So on the day of this lady's surgery to remove the tumor from her brain, the surgeons gave her a high sugar solution to drink for the purpose of shrinking her brain so they could access the tumor more easily. And it worked.
Yeah, so that's what that's what I was trying to allude to, is that the surgeons now tell people to eat a high sugar diet prior to surgery because they know that's going to shrink the brain.
In that case, absolutely. Absolutely. So, it doesn't get more real than that.
Yeah.
Sugar, you work with people in the weight loss area as well, Scott. So, you know that obesity shrinks the brain. As our weight goes up, our brain gets smaller. It's and that's a danger for long term. So
the more pressure, the more tissue you have around around your heart, and also around the carotid artery. So the carotid artery supplies the blood from the heart to the brain. And if you've got too much tissue on those two organs around the carotid artery and the heart itself, well, it's got to work harder. The heart's got to work harder.
Absolutely. And whatever impacts the heart impacts the brain. So if you've got, heart disease of any kind, then you need to take more care of your brain. Diabetes.
Well, obesity as well. If you're obese and you've got too much tissue around here, around the throat, then you're gonna cut off the blood flow. So then you're gonna have cognitive issues.
Absolutely. And today's Diabetes Day, I believe.
Is it type 2 diabetes day? Is it?
Yeah. So, that's something that, if your blood sugar isn't regulated, that's increasing your risk of future neurodegenerative diseases and cognitive issues. So, taking a focus on brain health. I mean, it really puzzles me why I guess the media and the medical profession isn't taking more of a focus on the brain. Because you see smoking ads, for example, quit smoking ads. They talk about the lungs and the heart, but they forget the brain. Nicotine, smoking cigarettes also reduces blood flow to the brain, which increases the risk of Alzheimer's disease down the track.
Yep. That's true.
So the brain is a very important part of our body. It runs everything. We need to look after it.
And what's it mainly made up of, Nicole?
Fat, DHA.
Yep. And that's why it makes me laugh when the health authorities say, "Oh, you shouldn't be eating too much fat." I'm thinking to myself,
good fat.
That's it. Thank you.
It can be just as dangerous. Well, it can be dangerous to have too much cholesterol. It can be dangerous to have too little cholesterol, because cholesterol makes up that. It's like the transmission in your engine. It helps the conductivity of your brain. Help those connections connect. So if you've got too little cholesterol, you'll be having cognitive issues too.
Yeah, that's right. And if you've got the good fats will produce enough cholesterol anyway. We need cholesterol. Cholesterol holds everything together.
Yeah.
It's also a transporter. Something I didn't know.
Yeah.
Cholesterol is actually a transporter as well.
So
if you don't have it, then so that's why if you're not getting enough fat in your diet, that's why the people with gallbladders can have issues with fat. They can get the foggy head, and because if they've had it removed, they won't be able to break down fat as well, so they can't have as much fat you consume, I should say.
Yeah.
So that can affect the heart. The brain eventually too, because they're not getting enough fat and they're not absorbing enough fat.
Yeah.
Their liver has to break it down, and the gallbladder is the one that's its job.
Yeah.
To break down fat. So and it takes up a lot of blood too. Is that right, Nicole? The brain?
That's right. And we need to drink more water. Yeah, keep our body hydrated. The brain's 80% water. So, in order for it to work in an optimized manner, it needs to be hydrated. So cut out sugar, eat healthy fats, drink more water, get lots of exercise. Plenty of research now that says that, getting regular exercise is more effective for depression than antidepressants in the long term. So lifestyle factors are critical to our well-being.
So that comes back to the fat and the carbohydrate balance. So the problem is we're told for a long time now, 40 years plus, that we should be eating less fat. And but the problem is when you take away one macronutrient. So macronutrients are your fats, your carbs, and your proteins. So you've only got three. You've only got three to choose from. I'm sorry to say. So if you take away one, you've only got two left. So if you take away your fats, you've only got protein and carbs left.
Yeah.
And because protein takes a lot to replicate and mass produce. Costs a lot too. Carbohydrates doesn't. It's very easy to make, and it's very easy to replicate, and it's also cheap.
Yeah.
So the problem is everyone's eating carbohydrates now, and that's why we have this issue. Well, that's why I have type 2. That's why I have diabetes, Dad. Like type 1. Don't get me wrong. Type 1. Some people are born without a pancreas, or they have surgery and they have to have their pancreas removed. That's fair enough. They need to watch how much carbs they eat. And they have to monitor their blood sugar levels. But it can be managed. It can be managed without medication. I know people who are type 1 and have managed their type 1 diabetes without medication. It can be done.
Yep, through lifestyle factors.
Yeah, correct. But type 2 diabetes, no. That's purely just eating too much sugar, and you just got to minimize it as best you can.
Yeah.
You can't avoid carbohydrates, guys. Sorry to say. You can't avoid it. It's in everything. You can't get away from it. And there's a reason why it's in everything, because you need carbohydrates to fuel. But the problem is the scale, because of that, we've got rid of fat. Now we've had to replace it with carbs. It's just gone crazy now. Now we've got all these issues, like I said. So tell us about another client that you've helped with their brain issues or brain injury.
Yeah, look, in this year, I've actually started working with some people with dementia as well. Or dementia-like symptoms as a result of stroke, and having great results with them as well, which is really exciting. So again, it's looking at doing a brain optimization assessment to determine, so they complete a comprehensive questionnaire. I analyze that to determine which areas of their brain are struggling, and then I put together a program with recommendations. One of my clients with dementia is taking omega-3, so I'm also a distributor for Zinzino. So the Zinzino omega-3 is something I highly recommend because it's the only omega-3 that actually has a test to determine that it's working, which I love. I was taking an omega-3. Sorry?
It tests your omega-6 to omega-3 ratio.
Yeah, that's right. And we should ultimately be 3 to 1.
Yeah.
But most people are way out of that zone.
Caveman was 1 to 1.
That's it. Yes.
Yeah, I thought I was healthy. I was not. I was way over the 3 to 1.
Well, my client with
you're right. You go.
My client with dementia, when I did the test on him before he started on the omega-3, he was 22 to 1.
Wow.
Now that inflammation in his body is not going to help keep that dementia from progressing. Yeah. So when our body's in a more alkaline state, it works more effectively and is happier. So, so he's now taking the omega-3 as well as a couple of other supplements I've recommended based on his brain profile. And it's quite. And the other lady that I'm working with who had a stroke and has dementia-like symptoms, her information processing speed has increased by 146% in the 2 months I'm working with her through doing brain training, changes in diet, a really healthy brain program.
And because you would see, so the more the elderly people, you're seeing a lot more of that.
I'm seeing more of them this year. Yeah, they're and so typically, I work with people in the NDIS space or privately, and they're people with mental health issues, with neurodiverse issues, with brain injury from road accidents, from strokes, acquired injuries, with corporate or business owners or people who are employed who are struggling to maintain their work, are struggling to be as productive as possible, struggling with memory and focus, distraction, that type of thing. I work with those people to improve their brains and their productivity. When our brain works right, we work right. When our brain works right, we make better decisions. When we make better decisions, we have better relationships, we have better finances, we get better jobs. So looking after our brain is just so critical. And the time to start is now, because Alzheimer's disease takes years, sometimes decades, from when it starts deteriorating your brain to when memory issues become obvious. And that's a long time to turn the train around. Now, you can't cure Alzheimer's disease, but you can certainly slow down the progression of it.
Yeah, definitely.
With good brain health strategies.
Yeah, that's right. I also read a study where they actually they're doing blood tests on the elderly, and they got I think there was about 100 subjects, and what they did was they were doing blood transfusions every 2 months. They did it for 12 months. And what they're doing was they're getting like young people in their teens. They were just, 18. They're just old enough to give blood, donate blood.
Okay.
And they're doing, I think it was 500 ml transfusions. Their marker, their brain activity and their blood markers improved 20%.
Wow.
Just by giving them blood transfusions.
Yeah.
And their dementia went away in 12 months.
Jeez.
So it's a study. I'll find it for you.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to read that. Yeah.
Because this is because that goes back to what you were saying. The blood flow and blood quality is very important.
100%.
So if your liver and kidneys aren't processing the blood properly, then that's another issue. And you see that a lot in you see that a lot in we get type 2 diabetics. Yeah, I see that a lot. I see that a bit in type 2 diabetics. They have that foggy head and can't think properly, and
yeah.
forgetfulness, the early stages,
Mm-hmm.
because of that reason, because their liver's not processing the blood properly, so they're not getting good quality blood to the brain.
Yep, critical.
All right, so tell us about any other good stories you got for us that tell us about how you've helped someone.
Oh goodness me, there's so many. I mean, I work with people from, well, the youngest I've worked with is 17. The oldest I've worked with would be about 65. And one of my first sort of, when I Get Brain Fit came to be through writing my book, Holding On to Hope. And as I was writing the book and doing my research, I found that there were some gaps in service delivery for people with brain injury specifically. So that's where my target audience was initially when I started the business. And I began working with a young man who had a brain injury as a baby and ended up with meningitis. So he struggled all through school with memory and learning, and got bullied and that sort of thing. And actually, his mum saw me on my very first podcast ever after I wrote the book. And oh my goodness, I look at that podcast now and go, oh my God, that's embarrassing. But she saw something in me that she thought I might be able to help her son. So she contacted me and I began working with him. And, back then, he had no friends and was really quite lost about the future, wanted to be independent, but didn't know how that would work. And look, he had just went from strength to strength through the sort of brain optimization program. And today he's working pretty much full time. He's got so many friends. He's running meetup groups and is just thriving in life. And, that is just so rewarding to be able to witness that sort of transformation in people through brain health strategies, through, really working with their unique brain and finding those clues that can move the needle, make momentum happen, help them get their goals.
Yeah, and so it was the meningitis that caused it?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And then, I've worked with people that have had strokes and, helped their progress. Everything from, I'm also a master hypnotherapist, so I've got a few tools in my toolbox that I can use. So people who are wanting to quit smoking, I help with that. People who want to have any sort of habit change, actually, the hypnotherapy can be really good. If they're not people, they want to exercise to lose weight, for example, but they just can't get themselves motivated. Hypnotherapy is going to help in that motivation space as well. Look, there's so many things. There's a whole list of toolbox items that can help change brains. And but like I said, I guess my main thing is that one size does not fit all. How many people do you know that have, here's another great story of someone who suffered anxiety all of her life, always had an issue with anxiety, and it increased as she got older. And she would be at home at least a few times a month, vomiting in the toilet, not able to leave the house because of anxiety. She saw multiple counselors, psychologists over the years. And how many people do you know that have been to a psychologist for years and years and years, and they're not actually making any more progress? But they did make progress in the beginning, and they, got strategies, and psychologists and psychiatrists certainly have their place in the health system for sure. But you see those clients that just keep going back year after year after year, and nothing's actually changing. They're treading water and just pretty much paying for a very expensive friend to listen to them. And this lady was in that kind of space. It had become a habit to go to a counsellor. So we did a brain assessment and got some strategies in place. She, for example, cut down her sugar, cut out coffee, reduced her alcohol intake. And I also did some hypnotherapy on her, some anxiety relief hypnotherapy. And she's not having to rely on anything but herself now to manage her anxiety. She's not at home stuck in the toilet vomiting anymore. She's more productive. She said to me, how guilty she felt about, letting the people around her down. Sometimes she couldn't, go to work functions and things because of anxiety. Very intelligent, proactive lady, but was just trapped by this anxiety. And today, she's free of it.
That's pretty cool.
Mm.
That's pretty cool. All right. We've done well. We're up to the 46-minute mark. So we'll we'll go on to the last two questions. So tell us, who's your ideal client or ideal avatar?
Yeah, so that person who might be struggling with memory, with focus, with procrastination, with resilience, that wants to facilitate change. Maybe that's a person who is struggling to get towards a goal. They might have had a goal or have a goal that they've been struggling to find momentum to achieve that goal. They might be sick of being sick. They might want, be worried about the future. Maybe they've got someone with Alzheimer's disease or dementia in their family, and they don't want to be that person in the future. They want to start making some proactive changes now. People with mental health issues, with neurodiverse issues, anyone who wants to improve their brain, because brain change is possible.
Cool. And we'll go on to the last question. So tell us, what information or ideas would you give us to create lifelong longevity, please, Nicole?
Okay, well, we've touched on a lot of those points. So just as a refresher, reduce your processed sugar. Number one.
Yeah.
You'll have a better brain for it. You'll be able to maintain your weight more easily. Drink more water. Get more exercise. They're the top three. And stay connected, even if it's only online. If you're socially isolated, get an online community. But staying connected with others is really important for your long-term health too.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you so much today, Nicole, for your time. Such short notice too. So I think we only asked you last week. So
You
I
did.
appreciate you.
No, pleasure. I'm always happy to talk brains.
Yeah, I agree. The brain is, in Chinese medicine, the brain and the heart are the shen, and that's where, if we don't treat it like a treasure, they say it in the classics, that if you don't treat it like a treasure, but you have to find it first.
And we can build those brain reserves, even though life factors do deplete our brain reserves over time. We can build them back up, and with neuroplasticity as our friend, that brain change is possible. So yeah, any questions, if you have participants or you are an individual that wants some private sort of assistance to improve your brain, please reach out.
So yeah, I'll, if you would like to, Nicole, I'll get my VA to my associate. She'll she'll give you the links to the 3 platforms I'm on. So people want to ask you any questions about getting brain fit, they can. So you can leave your details, and much appreciated for your time this morning, Nicole.
Pleasure. Thanks so much, Scott. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Thanks, guys. You have a great day too.